Hey everybody, Greg Pruitt here with Idaho Dispatch, and we are continuing our effort to interview statewide candidates for public office. And we are not very long away from the May primary, but so we're going to keep doing these interviews as long as we can and get as many candidates as we can so that you guys can be informed about where they stand on crucial issues to our state. And so joining me today is Debbie Critchfield, who is running for State Superintendent of Public Education. How are you?
I'm doing great. Getting
Good.
close to the primary. That's the best feeling that there is.
Yeah, I think everybody almost on any side and everywhere is kind of like
everyone's over it. They're ready to vote.
Let's be done.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So first, before we get into the issues on public education, what was the driving force behind you wanting to jump into the state superintendent race, number one? And number two, what was that like? If you don't mind disclosing, like with your family, your husband, you're like, hey, I'm going to do this. And he's going,
Sure.
You're nuts, or yeah, let's do it, or a mixture of both.
Okay. I sat for 7 years at the state education table as an appointed member of the Board of Education. And it's because of that experience that I confidently tell the voters of Idaho that it's time for a change. I work directly with our current person. I saw where those gaps, where I saw missed opportunities. I saw ineffective leadership. I saw so many ways that we could be creating the education experience that we all want and need. I fundamentally believe that COVID did not create how we feel about education right now, but it revealed it. And COVID is what really put me over the top. I thought about doing this for several years for a variety of personal reasons, family, and just not being in the right place with kids and so forth. I still had kids in high school up until recently. Didn't feel like it was right. And over the last 18 months, having a conversation with my husband and the work that I had done as president of the board, my husband's direct quote to me was, "You've been doing the job, go get the job." If you feel that you've got something to offer in the state and that where we're going is not the direction that we need to be headed, then he was very supportive of me. And it's a good thing because it's a job to be a statewide candidate.
Yeah. I can imagine. So when you say COVID put you over the top, what do you mean by that?
Everything was waived, paused, removed, et cetera, during the 2020 school year, the 2020-2021 school year. We had an opportunity in the K-12 sector to create something that fit us, that fit our needs of today, that fit our students. There were so many things that we learned. We learned that seat time is not the important element for preparation and for learning. We learned that kids and parents want to have more control and say over the educational experience that they have. We learned that there were other ways to assess. It's not about a test. It's not about all of these, what I would call 19th century ways of educating in a 21st century environment. And in the K-12 sector, it was like we were just on hold in this holding pattern, like, well, let's get through COVID, and then we're going to go right back into everything that we were doing before, which by our own state metrics have not been successfully working for us. Our graduation rates have gone down. We're flat to declining in our achievement for reading and math. We have less students going on to pursue post-secondary choices than ever before. And here we were, we had all this knowledge, we had all these opportunities to really go with something. And the person who was elected to do that job was absent, missing, late. And so, from my end as an appointed person on a policy board, there was only so much that I could do. And that's when I said, you know what, this is the time. I've got to reposition myself in a way to have that impact and influence in the leadership that I believe we need to have.
Okay. So what are some of you've been on the campaign trail for a long time.
1 year.
Yeah, a year. What are some of the top 3 issues that you are pushing as state superintendent for the Republican nomination?
I'm going to talk about our work ready and skills preparation for our students, the high school experience of what we're doing to make sure that our students are able to access the multiple opportunities that are available in communities and in our growing state. I want to transform the high school experience for juniors and seniors, less about seat time, more about the application of the knowledge. How do we anchor that to a work-based experience and getting kids the opportunity opportunity to explore in careers and things that they want to do. We're very good in the state at getting a kid to college. I mean, if you want to go, we've got a pathway for you. But for everyone else that may not feel or see the relevance of what they're learning, and again, I think that goes back to our declining graduation rate. And so I look at providing that relevancy through offering opportunities for our juniors and seniors to get credit for learning that takes place outside of the high school setting. So that's a big one. And added to that is a graduation requirement for financial literacy, that all of our students have access to that. Those are very different skills than what you learn in economics or algebra. But why is a credit score important? How do you balance a checkbook? We have students who graduate from high school who don't know how to sign a signature on a formal document when they go to the bank or somewhere else. And so those practical everyday skills, I think, are critical. The other thing that's a priority for me is reestablishing trust between education and everybody else in the state. And it's not just parents, but it's with business leaders, it's with the legislature, and frankly, it's with students who are owed an education that is preparing and equipping them for the needs of our modern times. I also look at rural schools. That's another one of my big priorities. Coming from a rural part of our state, 70% of Idaho is rural. They have challenges that are very unique and different, and in some ways compounded from what we see in our more urban areas. We've got to have someone that has lived that experience, that understands it, that can be a champion for that. And that is something that how we help establish that everyone's experience in the state is important, and it shouldn't matter dependent upon where your zip code is.
Okay. So I guess let's talk about maybe on top of those, let's talk about the funding maybe, because that's really where it seems like
and that's on my list too.
Yeah, a wide range of views on the funding, and the funding is ultimately what always comes down to: are we funding our education too much? Are we not, doing enough? Are we somewhere we're right there, but we just need to change how the education is taking place in the classroom, like you're talking about, moving away from seat time to more action time, so to speak. What is your thoughts on the current funding of Idaho's students?
That it's not satisfying any of our needs, and I don't think that we're getting the ROI on the investment. We've got more than $2 billion that go into education every year of our I'm a taxpayer too, taxpayer dollars, and yet we are left wanting. We're still feeling like, how come we're still not meeting our needs? And we see that through the evidence of more and more districts. 80% of our school districts go to their local community for supplemental funding. And in a lot of those cases, I guess I don't view textbooks as supplemental to the learning that's taking place. And so we're looking at a 30-year-old funding model, and we're trying to drop that into a modern time and, into 2020. And I don't believe that that we've got that match there. For me as an elected official, day one, I'm going to pull out that budget. Well, it'll be before day one. As soon as the primary is over, and we're going to go through that and have an audit process. I have not been a part of, at least in the last 8 years, any elected official, whether it's in any sector, that has done a review of the money that we're putting out. Is it still intentional for the priorities that we have? We've got a lot of one-offs. We've got a lot of things that we've been funding over time that districts are saying, we don't do that thing anymore. That's not a priority for our learning objectives. That's not a priority for our community. And if we're going to talk about taking pressure off the local communities, let's have a deliberate planning and strategizing of the money that we have now. And then you talk about, okay, well, are we lacking in some of these other areas? But let's first start with where we are. I think that that's a critical piece. Okay.
So, would you, I guess, essentially ask for a pause in funding until that audit could be done? Or
no, I think we've got it. For me, the primary May 17, and of course, everything, I'm confident and hopeful in those directions, figuratively May 18, but just very soon after that, you begin that process so that first day of the legislature, the current superintendent will be setting the budget for the next fiscal year. But as a new candidate coming in, I will have the opportunity to amend that budget. And that's where I'm going to have gone and done the homework and put the time in to say, this is how we need to amend, this is how we're going to move forward for this year, and then what's that long-term goal for people.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, and listening to both sides of this, the funding debate in particular, there are a lot of people who say, hey, look, we've got to stop dumping money into the education system because we're not getting that return on investment.
Yeah.
There's some people who say, we need to spend a lot more, especially in paying teachers more money so that we can keep good teachers in Idaho. And so, I think both sides seem to agree that there needs to be changes. But one side says more money, one side says stop spending money on the system that they don't believe is working.
And I'm right. I'm right in the middle of those ends of the same line. I do believe that we need to invest in our teachers. They're the investment that we know directly impacts what happens for kids in the classroom. If we need more competitive salary packages, our local districts need to have local funding control. That may not look like more money from the state, but what it looks like to me is more control over their own budget and the state getting out of saying you have to spend it this way and you have to spend it that way. And so we may get to a point where we say, you know what, maybe we do want more money in vocational training. And I think that we do. Okay, well, is that more money in the system, or is that taking away from something that we don't feel is getting us the same level of ROI?
Okay. What would you say? I was talking to a voter the other day, and they said that part of the problem in the United States, not necessarily just particular to Idaho, and they wanted to kind of see how candidates, especially for your position, would react. But they said the issue in the United States, for instance, is that we are such a modern world, and everything is so fast paced, and there's so many, let's say, distractions for kids between sports and all this other stuff. Sure. That they just don't care as much about education as maybe, kids in other countries that don't have it. So for instance, I served time in Iraq. I did time in Iraq, and we'd go and we'd drop off pencils and notebooks to kids at the schools in Iraq who are running around with no shoes on and tattered clothes. And they're extremely excited to get a pencil and a notebook. And the kids here, not quite the same reaction necessarily. So if that is an issue that you would agree that, kids here have a lot more distractions, how do you get them to care more about education and less maybe about some of the other stuff that could be holding them back?
I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to start with a little bit of a preface. I agree entirely. I would add to the word distraction the fact that we have so many what I'd call first world problems. As a nation, we are prosperous, and in Idaho, and this isn't to take away from families that are struggling. We know that that's the case, but by and large, we have students who haven't had to struggle for public education. And to your point, when you go outside of the U.S., let alone the Idaho, you feel and you see that difference. 3 years ago, one of my sons and I did a humanitarian trip in Peru, where we went to a part of the country where they had some of the most glaring examples of poverty that I've ever seen ever. And we were building a school there, and it was the exact same experience that you had. And so then I look at our children in Idaho and our family situation. I know that another result, I guess, if you want to call that, or an outcome of this kind of COVID experience, I hear from teachers all over that students are not engaging. And the word I keep hearing is languishing. It's like, if I feel like coming today, maybe I will. And, maybe I'll do my homework, or maybe I'll, show up. And parents have kind of gotten into this same field. So I think there's two things for me. So that was my preface to get to the actual answer to your question. One is high expectations have to be a part of what we talk about for kids. We need high expectations so that students know what they're reaching towards. And I think that needs to focus on engagement. We've got to look at behavioral health. We've got to look at learning loss, but we also have to look at achievement. How are we doing, and what are those expectations for kids? And then the other side of this is and I used this word earlier, but I think it is the perfect word, but the relevancy. For our high school kids, we need to make sure that they're connecting the dots, that what I'm learning means a job here. It means options for me. It means I'm going to be a successful adult. And so when we can provide that for our students, they're excited about wanting to be a part of it. Greg, I would think that when you were in school, there was that one or two classes that you looked forward to going to all the time, or that teacher that you look forward to being in their class. Let's have that be more than just one or two things that happen during a 4-year experience, but students are excited to be a part of what we've created and what we're managing, because they know that it means something good for them on the other side of a diploma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and I guess those kids, maybe the kids now, and I don't know this because I'm a little older, but maybe, the graduation rate in Idaho is not going in the direction that a lot of people want it to go. It's going down. Yeah. Is part of that, you think, how the curriculum is being taught? Is part of it, maybe they don't want to go to college because everybody has a degree now. That's what I hear all the time. Everybody's got a degree. Who cares about degrees anymore? I just want to go to a trade school instead of worrying about college. And I don't even care about high school. I'll just go to a trade school and learn what I want to do for my life.
I think that is both of those things. One of the things that was this big light bulb moment for me last spring, I participated with the Idaho Students Council Association takes in student leaders from all over the state, all the high schools. I was on a Zoom call with student leaders from all over the state. My screen was filled with all kinds of little squares. And one of the things that I asked the students, I said, what would you like adults to know now? We're almost a year out of, this COVID school year, if you want to call it that, at least the disruption. What do you wish adults knew, and what do you want adults to take away from this? Every single one of them, and these are student leaders, so they're, students that are used to achieving and very successful in school. They said the worst thing that happened was when the adults took away all of the rules as far as you have to attend. We don't count grades. We don't care about your homework. We don't do all of those things. They said every one of their friends, including them, struggled every day to does this matter? Do we even care about this anymore? We have got to get back into this place where we have high expectations, and we want to meet them by preparing our teachers so that we've got, good classroom environments. But fundamentally, how are our kids? We're trying to create citizens. We're trying to create responsible adults that build our communities, that maintain our form of republic, of our republic. And it has to start at that place that we have these expectations. That was such an amazing lesson to me from kids who you would have thought they would have said, hey, last year was super easy. We could breeze by. It didn't matter. Well, now we're seeing the results of that.
Okay. Interesting. Let's, I guess, shift gears a little bit. And you talk about the expectations and standards, and then the standards are another topic that I hear a lot about from parents and teachers, other candidates, is a discussion about the standards, and Common Core has been a long, big here in the state of Idaho. Are you a proponent of Common Core? Were you a proponent? And if Common Core is not the answer, what is the answer to the standards system here?
Okay. I was a proponent of Common Core when it first came in. I was a local school board member at the time. And I think it was one of those things where we thought, hey, and I believe fundamentally in standards, whether they're Common Core or not, we need to have standards for teaching. And then over the last number of years, while I was on the Board of Education, there was a lot of discussion and action on the legislative side to refine those and to take elements out that didn't fit our values or maybe weren't meeting our educational needs. So last year, I participated with the legislature to go through a review of that. And then the legislature, as you know, adopted or newly adopted Idaho standards. Now, there are some that would say, hey, it's still fundamentally Common Core, and that may be the case. I believe that we're to a point now where there's been enough changes that we look to see what happens with that. And if we're not getting the results we've got to change, because we don't have the time to keep replaying the same thing over and over. I want to add one other thing to this discussion. I think equal to what we're teaching is how we teach. We've got to have teachers who are effective instructors in the classroom, that have the classroom management to deal with severe behaviors, and that have the training that they need for the modern classroom. That is a big area that I'm not seeing that preparation happen in many cases.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe one of those things is, the mental health discussion with students has become a really big topic, and especially after COVID, when a lot of people were at home. A lot of students were at home for a very length of time. There was a large discussion over face coverings and whether face coverings were detrimental to kids. How do we, going forward, and teachers dealing with some kids who may be struggling mentally, how do you think that's addressed?
It is the number one. I'll tell you that more than teacher pay, the one issue that I hear from teachers consistently, I don't care if you are in Salmon, I don't care where you are, if you're in Montpelier in the state. Teachers say, we were not trained to deal with the severe behaviors. Now, I'm not talking about like a class clown type of thing, but students who, that's very different than students who are disrupting the entire day. And it's not just one kid anymore. Teachers are telling me that across the board, and it's our little people. It's not, big, our high school students, it's adolescents. This is a challenging time. Of course, they're going to struggle. I hear from first grade teachers who say that they're getting students who didn't attend any type of school last year that have no social interaction skills, and they can't talk to each other. And it's what they're having to overcome over the last 2 years. Is not insignificant. And it goes back to this, how do we give our teachers the tools and the strategies that they can use in the classroom? I do not want teachers to become therapists. That's a completely separate thing. What I'm looking at is arming our teachers, if that's the right word, with the information and tools that they need, that they can manage a classroom. We need something that's local and state, it's consistent. And frankly, I think we need to work on something with our Attorney General's office that kind of protects a teacher too. A teacher is scared to death to even like touch a kid or get too much of a disciplinary tone for fear that they're going to be sued or that there's going to be something happen to them. And so in the meantime, everyone is struggling, and kids that are hard in the class are typically hard at home, and parents don't know what to do either. And if we can direct parents to get outside help for their child, then that helps in the classroom, and then give teachers the appropriate tools that they need while a kid's in class.
Okay. Well, you said the word, you said arming teachers. So I'm just going to throw it out there now. I actually hadn't even thought about that. So
okay, here we go.
So, but I mean, school safety is a really big.
Oh, absolutely.
Here in Idaho, that debate on whether teachers should be able to have a firearm in the classroom locked up to protect themselves or their students. Right. Major, very hot button topic. Where do you stand on that particular issue?
Well, right now, a local board can designate a teacher. Under the board's authority, a teacher can be armed in the classroom, and I don't see any reason to take that authority away from a local board. The challenge is always, how do you balance that with the law enforcement and emergency services teams that come in, God forbid, and some of these scary situations where we need to make sure that law enforcement knows who the good guys are. We certainly would want to put a teacher in danger or further danger anybody else's lives inside of a school. These are thoughtful discussions that need to take place. That school safety is one of the priorities that I have. I've got many on how we partner with school districts when they talk about these things, and how we prevent and how we protect.
Okay. Let's do maybe one more topic, and then we can kind of do some cleanup if you've got some issues you forgot about. Sure. Okay. Let's talk about CRT. This is
all right.
One of the biggest discussions right now across the United States. It was obviously a big discussion over the last legislative session, with one side saying CRT is not a problem in Idaho, one saying that it is, and then maybe somewhere in between some people saying, hey, look, maybe it's not a problem in Idaho, but we don't want critical race theory being taught in our schools. Make sure it doesn't happen. What are your thoughts on the CRT debate?
What I've heard, the last thing that you said, is the majority of people that I talk to. Some of the folks, hi. Some of the folks that I speak with aren't even sure what it is. And many folks will ask me, I've heard this, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. And then you have a brief discussion, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, Yeah, we don't want that here. And I have seen parents have brought me, materials or things that have been in their classroom that I've said, well, I wouldn't call that CRT, but there are definitely things in there that are questionable that, for age appropriateness. This is how you have the process of going and having these conversations. For me personally, with CRT, I do not believe that it's appropriate in our public schools. It's in a graduate level theory class that adults can pay for at a university or wherever. We want to make sure that our students are, it's the phrase that everyone's using, we're taught how to think, not what to think. And when it comes to discussions about race relations, we need historical facts. We need more history. The good, the bad, and the ugly, you share all of it in an unbiased way so that we learn how to, move on from some of those things. This is how we learn to respect each other and work together. I have not seen boards that have deliberately and purposely chosen curriculums that fit into that. But then I've also seen, again, I even spoke with a teacher who said, I was looking for stuff to supplement a class and a lesson. And now we look back and think, maybe I shouldn't have had that there. What our districts need from the state level is a leader that will work with them on how to communicate with their parents, how to have more transparency about what's going on in the classroom, and how to bring parents in on the decision making when it comes to the books that are in the classroom.
Okay. All right. Are there any other issues on education that they haven't brought up, but you said, thought to yourself, hey, I'd like to mention this as well on what you're running on?
I'm trying to think. We've had we've talked about the preparation, the skills. Reading, I think, is still a critical piece of everything that we do. How we prepare our teachers to be reading teachers is important. I look across the board and we've got so many opportunities right now. I feel like we're at this critical place, and I really am trying to create an urgency about making the change and why I'm the candidate that can lead this. We have this opportunity again to create what we need that wraps around where our needs are. We've got more people moving into the state. How do we protect that feel of Idaho that we love? How do we prepare and support our teacher? Let's engage and empower the parent. Let's set high expectations for the students. All of these things and all the things that we've talked about, and many things that I'll think about later that I should have brought up right now, all roll up into one thing. It's what's the vision and who's going to lead it, and then who can effectively get that done. I don't need 4 years on the job. I don't need 1 year on the job. I've been training at this for the last 7 years. I'm ready to go. Day one, we're going to start.
Okay. All right. So at the end, we always let candidates do a campaign pitch. And so you're free to look at the camera, talk to the people of Idaho. You can plug your website and social media and all that good stuff.
Okay. DebbieForIdaho.com. I'll start with that because sometimes I forget about that. It's the number 4. I am running because I believe that Idaho deserves a strong educational leader. And I'm running because our teachers deserve more, our parents expect more, and our kids need more. We have an opportunity to move forward in the ways that we know, that we feel are right, how we prepare our students for the growing opportunities that are around us. We have a wonderful state, and the secret is out. People are aware of that. And as we look at where we want to be 5 years from now, who's going to get us there? I've got the experience, the knowledge, the background, the relationships to be able to get that done. And then I would argue that next to the governor, the state superintendent's job is the most important in the state. Education touches every part of our lives. It's an assignment that is very specific. It's not about being in the classroom. We're not hiring a state teacher. Teachers are important, but this is a different skill set. You're managing 2 billion taxpayer dollars. You're supporting all of the school districts in the state. You're working to represent parents. You're trying to make sure that our kids get educated and many other things. And that takes someone who understands the job, that has the demeanor and the experience and the skills to be able to get that done. And I fully believe that I am that person, and I'm asking for everyone's vote on May 17th.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time, and I know you're busy, especially right now, right before the end. So we appreciate you taking time.
Great. Thank you so much.